All right, I'm really excited for our next guest joining us here. He's a professor of constitutional law over at Northwestern University, but he's written a fantastic book that Nick and I happened to receive recently, and it's just a great read. And we've talked a lot about this subject matter on this show, so nobody better than an expert we bring in, Nick. Burning Down the House, How Libertarian Philosophy Was Corrupted by Delusion and Greed is the name of the book. You can go get it wherever books are sold, and that is Professor Andrew Koppelman. Professor Koppelman, Mike Leon, Nick Saveri, thank you so much for hopping on the podcast with us.
Thanks for having me.
You know, I got to tell you, we were talking about this off air. I'll bring it over here. We're going to get into a bunch with the book and the story at the beginning of the book that is a moral and economic dilemma. More on that in just a second. But why don't you, for our audience, tell us a little bit about what made you want to write a book about libertarianism overall?
Well, I teach constitutional law, and when the first federal court decisions came down, striking down the Obamacare statute as unconstitutional, I had occasion to read them. I thought that they were extremely strange as constitutional law. These are federal district courts, Republican appointees, who I thought were just making the law up, and it was obviously wrong given existing law. And so I blogged about it, and then more decisions came down, and I blogged about those, and I ended up writing a book, which was called The Tough Luck Constitution and the Assault on Healthcare Reform, arguing, because this is what I found out in my research, that there was a group of libertarian lawyers who basically were trying to import their own conception of liberty into the Constitution where it actually wasn't. And so the book basically tried to tell the story of how that lawsuit happened. And after I was finished with the book, I just found that I had unfinished business with libertarianism. In the course of writing the book, I tried to understand libertarianism. I tried to understand what it was. And I found that there weren't any books out there that weren't written by enthusiasts. And so I thought that there was a need for a critical account just for the general reader of what is libertarianism? Where does it come from? What are the varieties of it? How much sense does it make? I mean, it seems like libertarianism is an important enough set of ideas that there ought to be a book like that. And I thought that it was strange that there wasn't.
You know, I want to get into, because there's a bunch you just said there and a bunch in the book, and we're going to get into about the United States just being a two political party system, and your thoughts about that. I want to get your thoughts on that in a bit. But the opening of the book, I alluded to it before. It starts about this story about a town that kind of privatized their fire department. Citizens had to deal with the fire department, pay a fee, and then something happens. We got you covered with the insurance, and this one guy forgot to do it in 2010. He had been doing it for forever. Fire happens at his house. They call 911. The fire department doesn't come. They say, unfortunately, you didn't pay your bill this month. The family's offering to pay for it. It's a wild story, but I also think it's a microcosm for what is happening right now in America. Sometimes we blame the victim for not doing their part about being victimized. Can you tell our audience a little bit about that story overall and how it feeds into libertarianism?
Well, so Obion County, Tennessee, decided that it would essentially privatize its fire protection by contracting with a nearby town where each resident would pay a fee, exactly as you said. And Gene Kranick had paid the fee every year. And Kranick is getting old. He forgot, and his house caught fire, and he called the fire department, and he was told, sorry, you didn't pay your fee. He said, well, I'll pay whatever it costs. Please put out the fire. And they just wouldn't. They came, and because his neighbors had paid the fee, they wanted to make sure that the fire didn't spread to the neighbor's house, but they stood and they watched his house burn down. And this produced controversy in the press, and there were people on the left and the people on the right who agreed that this was the true face of libertarianism, that there are people on the right who said, we just need to have more of this. People need to take more responsibility. And people on the left who said, this is what libertarianism amounts to. This is why it's repellent. What we need to do is get rid of this minimal government stuff and have a government devoted to people and not profits. And as I learned about libertarianism in the course of writing the book about the healthcare case, I found that libertarianism actually comes in flavors, and in its original form, it would not have stood by and let the house burn down. That was a later development. That just libertarianism comes in varieties. And so there was a story to be told about how it evolved into this very strange form that wouldn't help people who were having really terrible, unforeseen misfortunes. And at the time, this was 2010, people were arguing about this case, but what they were really arguing about was Obamacare. Everybody understood that that was what was really at stake, because it was the same thing. Somebody experiences a misfortune, unforeseen, but catastrophic. And, in many societies, the society would come and help you out. And there was a vision of liberty being offered that said, well, in a free society, that's your tough luck. We leave you to your fate. And one thing I have in common with the libertarians is we both believe in freedom. We both believe that people should have control of their lives. I don't think that you promote freedom by leaving people to their fate. I think that that's a mistaken understanding of what human freedom is.
So you to that point, your book read as though we were exploring an idea that at some point took a wrong turn.
Yeah.
And in your view, when you think of the evolution of this concept of libertarianism, especially at a time where both political parties have a very fringe element that seems to play with the word freedom very, we'll say, creatively, where do we stand on what we define as the libertarian in 2023?
Well, the essence of libertarianism, as I understand it, is the idea that human freedom will be promoted if we shrink government down to an absolute minimum. That is, they believe in human freedom and they have a strategy for achieving it. And the way to achieve it is to minimize government services. You want fire departments, privatize it. You want healthcare, privatize it. If you don't have the money to pay for those things, that's your tough luck, because it's not the government's business. That's basically what libertarianism amounts to in its various forms. Deep doubt about whether government has any legitimate role besides basic police protection. Some libertarians are actually doubtful about even that, and they want to privatize that as well.
In your book, there is an excerpt that reads, the libertarians believe that so long ago, we do not violate others' rights, and we should each be free to live as we choose. At this time in 2023, when we think about both political parties, where do you see both parties reconciling or not reconciling with that sentiment?
Well, the Democrats seem pretty clearly opposed to it. One of the things that Biden is trying to do in the very major legislation that he just passed is to provide a larger scale government services, and if there's a massive expansion of Obamacare, there's a massive expansion of green energy, more than the private sector was providing. And the basic idea here is that there are worthwhile things for government to do that will actually make people more free to live the lives that they want. So Biden is pretty clearly opposed to Obamacare, and the Republicans are divided. There are some of them who are quite libertarian. They are certainly libertarian in their attitude toward taxes. The one thing that they can get together on is more tax cuts. Every time they get into power, more tax cuts. They are split about government services. Some of them very badly would like to get rid of Social Security and Medicare, but their basic problem is the voters don't want that Americans actually do expect that these government services are going to be available, and lots of others. So the Republicans have got a problem with their small government talk, because it's clear that if they ever actually delivered on it, a lot of them wouldn't get reelected.
Quick break here. We are presented, as always, by Fresh Roasted Coffee. If you could see my screen here. Fresh Roasted Coffee, since 2009, this Pennsylvania company has been delivering fresh roasted coffee. You can check out their website at freshroastedcoffee.com or shop them online through a bunch of different places. I'll read you something here. Nick, they roast the freshest coffee beans using the most eco-friendly roasting technology on earth. I happen to have a cup right here of fresh roasted coffee. I always record with it. Nick, why don't you tell the people, you're a coffee snob, why don't you tell the people why they should head on down to freshroastedcoffee.com and buy some of this amazing coffee?
First, Mike, let's talk about flavors. If you are a single origin kind of person like you and myself, they've got you. If you are a flavor person, they've got you as well. Flavor packs, individual items as well. And it's not just coffee, folks. You can also get tea. My wife's a tea drinker, so freshroastedcoffee.com's got her too. But more importantly, you can learn about the coffee. When you get to the website, there's a quiz that tells you what's the coffee that's best for you. Sumatra is my blend, and they got that one right. I can tell you that for sure. They'll do the same for you when you head over to the website.
FreshRoastedCoffee.com. Go to our episode description right now. There's a link right there, and at checkout, you're going to get a discount for this amazing tasting coffee. Head to FreshRoastedCoffee.com today. And now back to the show. Speaking of burning down the house, I wanted to ask you, because we talked about it in our first segment, and I hate to ask this question like this because we don't, neither Nick and I think that this person is a congressional person, but Marjorie Taylor Greene has a plan for a national divorce in this country, citing a bunch of different things that are already in states' purviews that they could do and would not need the federal government for. For example, the Department of Education, as somebody who is teaching young minds right now. Professor Koppelman, what do you think of Marjorie Taylor Greene's nonsensical national divorce policy?
I have to admit, I have not made a close study of Congressman Greene's plan, so I can't talk about it in any detail.
That's a good idea.
I can say that the idea that you're going to take various departments of the federal government and devolve each of them on the states, with respect to quite a lot of what the federal government does, there are economies of scale, and there's a level of expertise that the federal government has that the states can't duplicate. And some of the biggest successes of the federal government have been laws like the Clean Air Act or the Clean Water Act, which have really important local consequences. One of the I recently read in the paper that in Washington, D.C., the Potomac River, which used to be so dirty that you really didn't want to even stick your finger in it, it was that bad, that it is now clean enough that the city is planning on creating some beaches. Just absolutely remarkable. In New York Harbor, they recently saw dolphins. That's not something that you used to see in New York Harbor. So these are, but figuring out questions like, well, which chemicals are toxic? Exactly what do you need to maintain wetlands? These are questions that you really need a pretty substantial scientific bureaucracy to figure out. Breaking it out into 50 little bureaucracies in each one of the individual states is likely to give you less effective government services, although that might be the point. One of the points that I make in the book, and when I say that libertarianism is sometimes corrupted, libertarian theory is typically deployed by two very different kinds of people. One, and I have a lot of friends who are like this, are sincere idealists who honestly believe that shrinking government is going to make people freedom. The other type of libertarian are people in business who would like to be able to hurt other people without being bothered by the police. And the polluters are definitely in that second category. They like small government. They don't like being subjected to environmental regulation. It costs them money.
Professor, you actually just kind of walked into the question I was going to ask you. So imagine for a moment, and I don't know how you feel about this, but let's say you're at a dinner party. And I don't know how you feel about people asking you what you do and if you want to get into it, but let's say you do.
Sure.
And someone, upon hearing this, familiar with the book, says, well, they consider themselves a libertarian. Professor, what questions would you ask that person to see if that person was actually being serious or knowledgeable of the affiliation that they speak of?
Well, libertarians come in a number of varieties. What motivates people to be libertarians varies. The most fundamental difference is that some people think that libertarianism is just a matter of right, that government is robbing you whenever it taxes you at all. Some of these folks are basically anarchists. There are other people who are thinking about consequences. They're thinking about why free markets are good, why the absence of people can sort things out for themselves. They'll tell a story about corrupt or incompetent government. So the first question I'll ask is, what kind of libertarian are you? So when somebody tells me they're a libertarian, I want to know more about what do you mean by that and why?
Professor, before we let you go, I did want to ask you, you mentioned it as well during the interview that you were learning more about these Obama cases during the
Yeah.
Obamacare stuff. And you started to realize that some of this stuff is wrong. And some of this stuff has been settled law. It's been 200 plus years.
Mhm.
Why are we relitigating some of this stuff? And you discuss in the book how not far off libertarianism is to some of the political parties right now in existence in America.
Mhm.
But what will it take for America to have a multi-party political system like other countries like France, like Belgium, like Argentina,
Mhm.
because this is going on a long time now here that we have Republican ideology that is maybe too big, and the Democratic ideology that is too big, and it just encompasses into two parties. What will it take for America to adopt a multi-party political system?
Um, I think that we are some distance from a multi-party political system just because of the kind of constitution that we've got. When there are single-member districts where a majority of the vote gets the district, there is a powerful incentive for voters to cluster into two different political parties. And so the result is that in each political party, you get a range of views. That's why Bernie Sanders and Joe Manchin are in the same political party, and why Marjorie Taylor Greene and Mitt Romney are in the same political party, because that's the way in which the system divides. Whether it produces more effective government than a multi-party system, complicated question, and I don't think that we are likely to shift to a parliamentary system anytime soon. So I think that we've got to work with the system that we've got.
You can go get the book out now wherever books are sold. Burning Down the House: How Libertarian Philosophy Was Corrupted by Delusion and Greed. Again, wherever books are sold. And if you're a student in Northwestern, by the way, email us, can we please talk podcast@gmail.com. I want to know more about how these constitutional law classes are over there for Professor Andrew Koppelman. Thank you so much for hopping on the podcast with us. Continued success to you, sir. Stay safe. And next time you have another book coming out, we'd love to have you back on the show.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for watching the Can We Please Talk podcast. Whatever clip you just watched, we hope you enjoyed it, and we hope you stick around for some more. Subscribe to the channel. My partner's over here smashing the button. Come on, do him a favor. So hit subscribe.